Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm going to be doing another episode recap and review of American Horror Story Season 8 Apocalypse. This week's episode is number 4 in the season, and it is called Could It Be Satan? Now I've done videos on all of the previous weeks as well. I'll make sure I link that playlist up and down below in case you want to check any of those previous videos out. But for now, I'm just going to get on with the recap, and then at the end of the video I'll go through any theories and thoughts on what has happened so far. Now this episode started out with Michael's thoughts on Ms. Mead, back when she was a human, taking care of him, and I'm not actually sure if she had a different name then. I have a feeling it's still Ms. Mead, just because I don't think I've heard any other names mentioned, so that's what I'll be calling her, back when she was a human, before she was recreated as the android in the outpost. Now Michael was just reflecting and sort of thinking about her. He was thinking how she was the closest thing that he ever had to a mother, and that he wasn't sure how she found him. In this scene they were sitting down to a meal, and she pulls him up before he starts eating to get him to say grace, but of course it's not a standard sort of grace. He's basically praying to Satan instead. Also in that kitchen there was a little satanic altar behind Ms. Mead. I'm not really sure if I'm describing that incorrectly, but there was certain symbols and items back there that definitely looked like that to me. I just wanted to point out here how happy I am at the fact that Ms. Mead is obviously confirmed as being her own character, and any of those theories that were floating out there have just been squashed, because obviously I thought from the get-go she could not have been Constance inside Ms. Mead. To me that made no sense, and I spoke about that last week, but obviously now it's all cleared up, the fact that she is her own character. Also on that note, there was a brief millisecond where I did wonder if Constance was going to be in the picture then, just because it kind of seemed like her house. I watched season 1 a couple weeks back, so maybe I'm forgetting, but I feel like that kitchen looked pretty familiar. Maybe it was just similar looking. If someone can clear that up for me, I'd really love to know. Was that still Constance's house? We don't really know what's happened to her. Maybe Ms. Mead was a babysitter in that house, or maybe it's a completely separate house. I'm sure we'll find out in future episodes. Now, since all of that was a flashback, Michael is talking with Ms. Mead right after the conclusion of the previous week's episode. The witches have entered the outpost, and he was sensing their presence. And since this week's episode picked up right after last week's episode, it is showing the aftermath of the new witches being resurrected. The witches were explaining to the 3 that were resurrected about what had happened and what was going on. Also, I do believe Cordelia told Mallory that there was an identity spell cast on her to make her forget her previous memories of being a witch. Michael walked in to see them, and there was a brief little bit of time where they were just slinging insults back and forth. I really liked the moment when Myrtle said that the state of the world was almost as bad as his dinner jacket. That was really funny. I love Myrtle. Michael was there telling all of them that they couldn't defeat him, and pretty much by the end of everything that was about to happen, they would wish that they were dead. Also, when all of this was occurring, Dinah was trying to separate herself from the rest of the witches. She didn't really want to be involved in any of this. Also, due to a comment that Myrtle made, it's clear that they are using the term warlock on this show rather than male witches, or just as witches, which is good to know because myself, and I know a lot of other people out there, were a little bit confused on what to call them. Now at this point we do see another flashback in the episode, and this one took up a great deal of time. It's said that it was 3 years before the bomb, and it's just showing the boys' school that we already knew was there. Venable mentioned this in the first episode, and I guess a lot of us assumed it would be a male witches or warlocks school, and that is confirmed. That's what they were. I wrote down what it was called somewhere. So I think it was called the Hawthorne School for Boys or something like that. And in the school there's just a few things happening. So there are a few young warlocks practicing spells, and the teachers, I'm not really sure what to refer to them as, but the higher up warlocks go to meet someone else named Ariel, who they refer to as the Grand Chancellor. So he seems kind of like, well, he's not the supreme equivalent because they've established that is something else entirely, or potentially not even a thing, but he definitely seems higher up than the others. And all of the men go to this office to watch a video of Michael being interrogated by a police officer about a stabbing that has occurred. Michael is saying that his fingerprints wouldn't be on the knife, and he's saying he didn't do anything. When the policeman presses him, he just throws him against a wall or the ceiling and just sort of mangles his body a little bit. But of course this is all by the power of his mind again. He's not touching him, and eventually we see him kill the detective in the video. Now the warlocks that were watching this argued whether or not they thought he was a fellow warlock. Due to the power shown in the video, they discussed a prophecy about an alpha warlock whose power would exceed even a supreme witch's, and basically if he could perform all of the 7 wonders, that would put them at the top of the hierarchy of supernatural beings. So Ariel went to the jail to see Michael and told him that he thinks he's a warlock. And we see another flashback of Michael with Ms. Mead at a butcher shop. She was trying to get a goat's head and the butcher basically didn't want to give it to her. Michael really didn't like that. He was sort of telling him off for being rude to her. And after they squabbled a little bit, he basically shot some knives at the man at the butcher, killing him. And that seemed to be why he was in police custody to begin with. So Michael goes with Ariel and Ariel just gets him out of the jail cell. While they're leaving, Ariel pins, I think it was a police officer or maybe just a guard, against the wall, saying that he'll hold him there until they're all out free. Now Michael seems to be surprised by this and he says how cool it is to Ariel, but without Ariel knowing, he snaps the man's neck as they walk away. Once they're outside, Ms. Mead is actually watching Michael leave and she's sort of saying that she knows that he will make her proud someday. She's just out there cheering in the street. And Ariel takes Michael to the school, which is, of course, Outpost 3 that we've already seen in the show. And we knew this was the boys' school, so this isn't really a surprise, but it's just good that they're explaining this all again. Ariel explains to Michael that they moved to the school underground in what we now know as the bunker, after backlash from Cordelia outing all of the witches and the witching world. Down in the school, Michael gets introduced to all of the other young warlocks, and some of the older warlocks run him through some tests. Also, I wanted to point out, I thought it was really interesting how they showed the progression of time, just in terms of Michael's style. So I guess he looked really young when he was in that police interrogation and in the jail cell, just from his styling and hair, so outfit, makeup and everything like that. And also he looked a great deal older than that when he was in his uniform. His hair was a little bit different, he was performing all of these tests. And now of course he looks like an adult when he's been wearing his regular getup in the past few episodes, so I thought that was really effective costuming. Although I did note something down, I really hated this, and I remember seeing it in trailers and it annoyed me then as well, so I just have to say it. I hate the boys, the Warlock's uniform with that little bow thing. It just looks like Colonel Sanders to me and I really don't like the look of it. One of the tests that is being administered by the older Warlocks is pretty much getting him to create snow out of moisture in the air, which we have seen in promos or the big season trailer. And I assumed it was Michael. I'm sure a lot of other people did, and we figured it was a big test in this witches or warlocks school from the start, so I thought it was really interesting that that has actually happened from what we all expected. And of course he creates the snow, which at first makes all of the men out there happy to see the snow and him performing this task, but then he does take it a little bit overboard and starts frightening them. And eventually he does get snapped out of it by one of the warlocks. At the same time, at Ms. Robichaud's academy, we see Zoe teaching a group of young witches or beginner witches on just certain spells. She's getting them to change the colours of petals. Mallory does this in quite an impressive way. Cordelia sees it as well. She turns the petals into a different colour, blue, and then they turn into butterflies and then back into petals. So it was very pretty and very impressive. Zoe mentions to Cordelia that Mallory had told her that her bloodline stretched back to the witches of Salem. Now, because of the warlock's suspicions that Michael could be the potential alpha, they summon the council to their school in hopes that they can try and get him to sit the 7 wonders. The council currently consists of Cordelia, Myrtle and Zoe, so they head out to the school. Once Cordelia sits down to talk with them, they do explain the situation, saying that they want her to test Michael on the 7 wonders. They also bring up the fact they feel that Cordelia left behind one of her witches. They're referring to Queenie, who is trapped in the Hotel Cortez, who we do see playing endless card games with Mr. March. It's really good to see Evan Peters play Mr. March again. I did really love his character. Cordelia explains to them, and it shows us the fact that she did go to the Hotel Cortez to try to get her out, but she couldn't. It just showed her lots of times trying to walk out with Queenie. Kind of like in season 1 when Violet was trying to walk out of the murder house when she didn't know she was dead. She just kept looping and ending up back inside. The same thing was happening to Queenie, and at first I wondered, why isn't Cordelia doing any magic to get her out? Why is she just trying to walk her through the door? But Cordelia did say she tried to do some spells to free her and nothing worked. She tried for a few days and sadly couldn't get her out. Cordelia also tells the warlocks that she will not get Michael to sit the 7 wonders just because it's too risky, and how Missy died, it was too much of a risk and she just wouldn't do it. At the same time, Michael is hearing all of this. His eyes are a different colour and he's sensing what is going on basically. He's sketching the Hotel Cortez, so it seemed like some sort of special spell or second sight that he's having about what is going on and where Queenie is. And he goes to the Hotel Cortez to get Queenie out. He just says that he's there to take her away, and Queenie is of course skeptical considering that Cordelia wasn't able to get her out, but She goes with him to the door and manages to walk out of the hotel. We also see a great scene of Madison in her hell, and I think this is something that a lot of people speculated was hell. I definitely thought so as well when we saw promos showing Madison inside a shop working in retail. Of course, it's gotta be hell. And there were a couple funny moments in the scene. People waiting in a long line were asking her if she was Lindsay Lohan, and then they discounted it, saying no, she couldn't be. She was nobody. She's arguing back. She does seem aware that she's in hell. She's saying that the rest of them were nobodies since they didn't have their own personal hell like she did. And while she's folding up towels that constantly seem to get unfolded and messed up, fun fact, I've actually done that exact same job before. It was not fun at all. But she's just folding all of these towels, and Michael approaches and says who he is and that he's there to get her out. And Madison tries coming onto him when Queenie sort of steps up as well because she's there too and says something like, wow, you're even a hoe in death, which I thought was pretty funny. And Queenie explains to Madison where she was in the hotel, just full of boring white people just like Madison, and that Michael was able to free her. Now at the same time, back in the boys' school, it wasn't really clear if maybe Cordelia was sensing some of this was happening, or maybe she was just pissed off about all of the Warlock's questions, maybe worried if there was an alpha because something seemed a little bit off. She was focusing or doing something weird, I noticed. But all of the witches do get up and leave the school. As they are coming to the surface, there's lots of slow motion walking from both groups. When they get up to the surface, they see Michael walking along with both Queenie and also Madison. And when Cordelia sees them, she faints. So of course the witches do try to check on her. Michael's standing there smiling, Queenie runs over, and so does Madison, if not a little bit slower. She was seemingly less concerned, surprise, surprise, but they're all looking over Cordelia, and then that's where the episode ends. So I've noted down a few thoughts on the episode so far. I feel like compared to the previous episodes, it wasn't as exciting, if that isn't too harsh to say. Hear me out though, there was definitely lots of important information that we learnt, and I guess I'm happy that we saw the witches in action again. They had a great deal more airtime than they did in the previous week, so I'm happy about that. But it just seemed to consist of a lot of flashbacks, backstory, and kind of putting the wheels in motion for future episodes. So I do get the fact that it was necessary, but it was definitely a different tone to the previous episodes, even just aside from the fact that they weren't dealing with the apocalypse at present, since this is all happening beforehand. Now I'm sure I'm not alone on thinking this, but it seems like Michael has just brought back those witches to prove to Cordelia how powerful he is. He's not doing it out of the goodness of his heart, he's just doing that to show Cordelia that he is powerful, hopefully to try and get her to administer the 7 wonders, and maybe just to get her on his side a little bit. Or the only other thing I'm thinking is that this is maybe part of a prophecy in order to bring on the end of the world, but that might be a bit of a stretch. Also, I have to say, I am so glad that those awful theories of witches being a part of the other witches, or, you know, Zoe being inside Mallory and Miss Mead being Constance, really, I'm glad that none of that has happened. I know I didn't have to stew on that for too long, and they've kind of put it all to bed, those theories. I'm really glad about that. I didn't think it would happen, but just considering them made me want to laugh and scream at the same time, so I'm so glad that they didn't happen. Also, I wanted to point out something I'm thinking about Timothy and Emily, who were of course killed off with bulk of the people in the bunker in last week's episode. I should have mentioned this then because I thought about it, but I didn't think to mention it. I am considering that maybe they were introduced and have been killed off, but will be brought back if what we think will happen about the witches being here to reverse the apocalypse, and none of that happens. Maybe it will show Timothy and Emily living successful lives, or maybe it will show them together in some sort of happy ending scenario. Who knows? I'm thinking that they were introduced for a purpose. Even though they were killed off, I do have a feeling that they will be back. Also, I have a few quick thoughts on some episodes moving forward. I saw the list of the episode titles and I see that 2 weeks from now, so episode 6, I think, is called Return to Murder House. So it'll be very interesting to see that house and also certain characters from the house again. Also, something I'm wondering here, I'm wondering where Misty J is. Obviously, she is in her own personal hell as well, just like Madison. I don't know if she'll be brought back by Michael. Maybe that would be too much of the same, but I do remember reading somewhere that she will be back, so hopefully it won't be long until we see her again. But at least we know Michael has that power. If he doesn't bring her back, maybe Cordelia will try and show him that she is more powerful than him by doing the same thing with Misty. Maybe, maybe not. Obviously Cordelia couldn't bring Queenie out of the Hotel Cortez, but we haven't really seen her try to bring anyone out of hell, so maybe that's something that Cordelia will do in future episodes to try and one-up Michael. Because from everything I read online, I feel like I got a sense that Misty would actually be back. Who knows, maybe it will just be flashbacks, although I do hope not. Hopefully she will be back in a real sense. Also, obviously we haven't seen Zoe in any present day scenes, but I have a feeling she'll be around for a lot more of everything, not just those 3 years prior to the bombs. I guess one thing to think about is the fact that there is a photograph that I know has been floating around online a lot of the coven sitting down with some of the new witches and the old coven. I know Zoe was there. Interestingly enough, I feel like there was also one of the warlocks at the table. I'm going to have to put up the picture. I'm sure if you're interested in the show and you've been reading a couple of theories and things, you might have seen it. Now, I did also notice some sleuths were kind of looking at reflections in the table and everything, and even though the background of the table where everyone's sitting, everything's blacked out. It was blacked out when they released the photo, but some people have had a look at the reflections and they can see a chandelier and they're assuming that it is at the Coven House. So I guess maybe everyone sits down to dinner to make peace. The warlocks, maybe they're trying, or at least one of the warlocks, perhaps they're talking about Michael, who knows. But I just thought that was an interesting thing to mention. I noticed that in the comments on my video from last week, someone brought it up, and I thought I should mention it since I've seen it all over the place when I've been reading online about the show. It seems like a pretty popular image that many people are analysing, so I'll make sure I share it here in case you haven't seen it yet. Alright, now I think that's all the thoughts I had to share on this week's episode and episodes moving forward. So I did want to thank you for watching the video today. I do hope you enjoyed it. Please leave me a comment down below sharing any thoughts that you have on the episode, on the season, or any theories moving forward, because I love to chat with you in the comments down below. But for now, I wanted to thank you again for watching, and hopefully I'll see you next week. Bye!